You are walking along the edge of the Nile. The air is warm, thick with the scent of river reeds and distant temple incense. The sand beneath your feet is soft but powdery, kicked up in lazy clouds as you pass rows of adobe homes, clustered tightly together like sun-baked loaves of bread. It's 1400 BCE in Thebes, and though time feels eternal here, life ticks steadily forward with sun, shadow, and schedule. You pause in front of a humble home where a servant girl sits cross-legged on a stone stool. In her hand, she holds a twig frayed at the tip, slightly darkened, gently moist. She moves it rhythmically around her mouth, gnawing and twisting it against her teeth with the practiced ease of someone who's done this thousands of times. You're watching the ancient Egyptian toothbrush at work, the miswak stick. You might assume that ancient Egyptians, buried under gold and myths, didn't think much about dental hygiene. You'd be mistaken. The miswak, likely cut from Salvadora persica, also called the toothbrush tree, was a daily ritual tool, cheap and effective. But why did they need it so badly? The answer, quite boringly, lies in their bread. Ancient Egyptian bread wasn't soft or fluffy. It was hard, gritty, and full of tiny bits of stone and sand. Their flour was ground using sandstone querns, which left behind minute particles that embedded themselves in the final product. Every bite, by the time most Egyptians reached 40, if they lived that long, their molars were worn almost to the gum line. This wasn't just a problem for the poor. Even the royal mummies show extreme dental wear. Ramses II, the so-called great builder and warrior, had terrible abscesses and multiple missing teeth. His preserved body may lie in splendor, but his last years were likely spent in silent, aching discomfort. And so the miswak wasn't just cultural, it was survival. Each morning the people rose with the sun and rinsed their mouths with river water or herbal infusions. They chewed on fresh twigs, fraying them into a kind of primitive brush. Some dipped the sticks into crushed rock salt or baking soda made from natron, Egypt's abundant mineral. Others ground dried mint or myrrh into a powder for a refreshing polish. But this wasn't done in private. Dental care was a public, communal act done on porches, in courtyards, beside cooking fires. This practice wasn't limited to the rich. Laborers building the great tombs of the Valley of the Kings were provided with food, beer, and even chewing sticks by state-run kitchens. Archaeological digs have uncovered bundles of twigs in workmen's huts, carefully wrapped in linen like sacred tools. You imagine now the slow routine of it, the chew twist, the soft rubbing motion, the light scraping sound. It must have been oddly meditative, a moment of calm between the harder parts of daily life. Perhaps it even felt good, like a quiet break from the endless tasks of the day, hauling water, pounding flax, pleasing temperamental officials. Interestingly, the Egyptians had a word for toothache, sebu, and though they had no modern dentistry, their medical papyri reveal attempts to treat it. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical text dating back to around 1550 BCE, includes recipes for remedies using crushed onions, cumin, incense, resin, and most strangely donkey fat. These were heated, mixed, and applied as pastes or rinses. Sometimes honey was added. Other times there was simply prayer, but no drill, no extraction, most likely. The best treatment was prevention, and so the chewing stick reigned even among the upper classes. Grooming tools included a place for dental Care. Ivory boxes with compartments for powders, sticks, and rinsing cups have been found in tombs. Some even had lids carved with protective deities, as if to say, "May your mouth be clean even in the afterlife." Yet, what's most fascinating is how unimportant this all seemed to be to the scribes. There were no poems to the chew stick, no great myths explaining its power. It was just part of life, mundane, unremarkable, as ordinary as sandals or sunburn. Still, historians today look at these twigs and see something powerful, a thread connecting us with people 3,500 years gone, a shared instinct to protect our bodies, care for our smiles, and find small rituals of control in a dusty, unpredictable world. The chewing stick may not seem heroic. It won no wars, it built no pyramids, but it helped people survive a landscape full of tooth-cracking grain and limited medicine. It gave comfort, perhaps even pride. And so we return to that servant girl outside her home, her hand moving in slow, steady rhythm. Was she thinking about her plans for the day, her family, a festival on the horizon, or nothing at all, just enjoying the dull quiet of a clean mouth at sunrise? She sets the stick down, rinses her mouth, and steps back inside. But now we wonder, how did this humble stick spread across borders, ending up in other ancient civilizations, sand possibly even influencing toothbrushes? Today, you return to the warm hum of ancient Thebes, but now the sun is higher, and the narrow alleyways of mud brick homes are alive with the shuffle of sandals, distant goat bleats, and the rhythmic clack of pottery being stacked. And though the chew stick remains as ordinary as a broom or basket, its quiet story is beginning to travel much farther than you might think. The Egyptians, while famously rooted in their desert cradle, were never truly isolated. Trade networks pulsed through their society, like the bloodlines of the Nile itself, caravans crawling through the Sinai, ships hugging the Red Sea, barges moving upstream and down, always full of cargo, gossip, and occasionally dental habits. Among the items exchanged, grain, linen, beer, papyrus were medicinal herbs, and strange little twigs. The chew stick, simple though it was, became a curiosity, especially to traders from lands to the south and east. The kingdom of Kush, Egypt's powerful neighbor and at times its conqueror, adopted many Egyptian customs, from hieroglyphs to temple building. It is entirely likely that they also took a liking to the chew stick, or perhaps they had a version of their own long before. The exact botanical origins of the Egyptian miswak are debated. Some scholars believe it was the Salvadora persica native, not just to Africa, but also to parts of the Arabian Peninsula and India. This means the chew stick wasn't necessarily invented by the Egyptians, but rather absorbed, much like so many small innovations that drift silently across borders without ever getting recorded in stone. Let's shift your view now to a merchant's barge. Sails half died as it hugs the current toward the delta. Among its goods are bundles of reeds, amphorae of dried figs, bundles of linen, and wrapped packets of herbs, each labeled with thin ink marks. And in one of these packets, short, carefully trimmed twigs, dried but still fragrant, bundled in a scrap of cloth. This boat is not heading north for ritual or military glory. It's bound for trade. And from the delta, another ship might carry the same bundle to Byblos, a city nestled on the eastern Mediterranean coast. There, Phoenician traders might pick it up curious, perhaps even skeptical of its purpose. But curiosity travels quickly, and before long, people who had never seen the Nile might find themselves chewing on its twigs. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, the miswak was not just a tooth toollet, was part of a wider system of cleanliness. The ancient Egyptian concept of mata, kind of universal harmony or balance, demanded cleanliness of both body and soul. Temple priests shaved their entire bodies, including eyebrows, and bathed multiple times a day in cold water. Common people might not match that rigor, but they followed the rhythm. Morning routines, particularly for the middle and elite classes, were surprisingly elaborate. One might rinse the mouth with herbal water, perhaps, a blend of myrrh and mint, chew on a miswak until the tip was soft and brush-like, rub the frayed end over the teeth, slowly and repetitively. Use a small bronze or reed pick to dislodge anything stuck. Apply natron or salt powder as a finishing touch. This wasn't dental vanity. It was religious, social, and hygienic survival rolled into one. There's evidence that dental care was part of courtly etiquette as well. When visiting nobles from foreign lands came to meet with pharaohs or viziers, they were expected to appear washed, shaved, and deescaline of breath. Halitosis, though not named, was clearly understood and avoided through both mouth rinses and chew sticks. But here's where the story starts to meander. Toward mystery was the miswak, the inspiration for later toothbrushes. The ancient Greeks used toothpicks, and Hippocrates mentions dental scrapers. The Romans, too, had tooth-cleaning tools made of silver, and some applied charcoal or crushed bone as polish, but none described a chew stick exactly. So, was the miswak a cultural cousin, or the original toothbrush ancestor? What we do know is that Islamic medicine, centuries after Egypt's new kingdom had crumbled, embraced the miswak with full fervor. The Prophet Muhammad is recorded as having used and recommended the miswak, praising it as a purifying tool beloved by God. This spiritual and hygienic endorsement led to the stick being spread widely throughout the Muslim world, from the sands of Arabia to the coastlines of Southeast Asia and North Africa. There's something beautifully circular about this. A tool used quietly by a girl in Thebes finds its way across time and empire, becoming a daily act of devotion in medieval Baghdad, a portable toothbrush in the spice markets of Zanzibar, a wedding gift in 12th century Cairo, always humble, always small, always slightly frayed at the end. Sticks we find today in many modern cities, from Lahore to Lagos, find them still sold at markets, their ends wrapped in foil or string, often sold by street vendors who inherited the habit through generations, unaware that the fraying little twig in their hand has a lineage older than the pyramids themselves. But even now, the history remains quiet. Museums rarely display chew sticks. Textbooks skip them. And yet they've lingered on, humble, essential, boring, the kind of thing you use without thinking, but would miss if it vanished. So we circle back again, to the Nile, to the girl, to the soft rhythm of chewing in the morning light. But now we imagine other versions of her long trade routes. In marketplaces, at riverbanks, far from Egypt, doing the same thing. Different languages, different gods, different lives, but the same small motion of self-care. Still, a question lingers like the scent of mint. Did the Egyptians understand the real science of their stick-saw? Were they just following ritual and tradition, unaware that they'd stumbled upon one of the most effective dental tools in human history? The sun is setting over the Theban hills now. A golden hush has fallen over the Nile, and the city moves into its slower rhythm, bakers stoking fires for the evening bread, children herded indoors, and the temple priests beginning their night rites with water, oil, and careful chants. And somewhere, someone is still chewing. But let's step back for a moment and ask, what did it all mean in the larger span of history? What legacy did this humble chew stick truly leave behind? We begin again with the ancient Egyptians who, for all their monumental architecture and mystical religion, were deeply practical people. Their dental habits, though rooted in tradition and ritual, were evidence of this practicality. Dental pain was not abstract. It was daily, nagging, and dangerous. Infections could spread quickly, and without antibiotics or trained dentists, a bad tooth could lead to death. The miswak wasn't a cure, but it helped, not through divine magic, but through real, physical, cleaning its fibrous bristles, gently sweeping away plaque. Its natural antibacterial compounds, killing harmful microbes. And still, they never wrote it into myth. The chewing stick was never given a god, never blessed by a pharaoh, never inscribed on a tomb wall with cosmic significance. It lived in shadow, in quiet moments, between prayers and taxes, between grinding grain and mending sandals. But it did something bigger. It persisted. As the new kingdom faded into the chaos of the Third Intermediate Period, as Thebes gave way to Tanis, as Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, and Persians took their turns as rulers of the two lands, the chew stick remained. It survived dynasties. It survived collapse. It even survived irrelevance. Fast forward centuries later, Roman Egypt, with its Greco-Latin bureaucracy, brings in marble statues and tunics, but still includes Egyptian tools in everyday life. The miswak quietly exists here too, and in the bustling, dusty streets of early Islamic Fustat, we find new references to it, this time elevated, not by pharaohs, but by religious scholars. In the Hadiths, collections of sayings attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, the miswak, or siwak, appears again and again. Were it not that I might burden my followers, I would have ordered them to use the siwak before every prayer. The siwak cleanses the mouth and pleases the Lord. Now the chewing stick had a divine recommendation, and in that moment, a quiet household habit became a religious tradition, woven into the daily life of millions. Markets began to sell them as part of Friday preparation. Scholars debated which wood was best. Dentists of the medieval Islamic world wrote treatises on its usefulness, citing both practical and spiritual benefits. By the time the chew stick reached the bustling ports of Zanzibar, Mombasa, and even southern India, it had become a cultural institution, a portable, biodegradable, and spiritually significant toothbrush, small enough to tuck behind the ear, cheap enough for anyone to afford, shared across continents, without empires, without armies, just by word of mouth and shared need. Meanwhile, in Europe, dental care took a more metallic route. By the 17th century, wealthy Europeans used hog bristle brushes mounted on bone or ivory handles, expensive, stiff, and harsh. These brushes were often paired with abrasive powders of crushed seashells, or burnt bread. Dentists were rare, and toothache was a fact of life. In 1780, William Addis of England is credited with producing the first mass-manufactured toothbrush, but even he, in jail at the time for causing a riot, reportedly got the idea by watching inmates clean their teeth with soot and rags tied to bones. His invention marked the start of modern toothbrush design, but not its origin. What's striking is that the chew stick continued alongside these modern tools. It never went away. Even now, in 2025, millions of people around the world still use them. Some because of tradition, some because of faith, and some because science has finally caught up with the ancients and confirmed, yes, the miswak works. It reduces plaque, it fights bacteria, it promotes gum health. It is, in short, effective. And so, 3,500 years later, we must pause and consider, how did a dry twig with no marketing campaign, no patents, and no celebrity endorsements manage to outlast entire civilizations? Maybe it's because of what it offered, a sense of quiet control. In a world filled with uncertainty, droughts, wars, and pharaohs you'd never meet, you could still rise each morning, take your stick, and tend to your own mouth. A private ritual, a small act of care. You picture the girl again, now older, perhaps a mother, passing the habit down to her children. You picture a trader in Kush showing a friend how to fray the tip just right. A scholar in Baghdad writing down its virtues. A grandmother in Lagos tucking one in her basket before heading to the market. All of them. Story 2. The Sandal Maker's Apprentice. A day in the life in Thebes. Wake just before dawn in the city of Wasatone. Today, as Thebes, the air is cool, not yet weighed down by the heavy sun. The sky is slowly turning from inky blue to dusty rose, and the first low calls of early risers echo through the adobe alleyways. You, however, are already awake. Your name is not important, but your hands are small and calloused. You are an apprentice to one of Thebes' sandal makers, a man named Niasi, who says little but expects much. Today, as on every other day, for the past 2 years, you will prepare materials, watch his every move, and try not to ask too many questions. The shop is not a shop, as one might imagine, with shelves or signage. Instead, it is a shaded alcove near the marketplace, just to mud brick walls, a woven reed mat, and a makeshift wooden table stacked with leather scraps, palm cords, and worn bronze tools. To the untrained eye, it looks like clutter, but you know every piece has its purpose. The day begins, as it always does, with fetching water. You balance the jar carefully from the communal well, walking with the quiet discipline Niasi insists on. The water is not for drinking, it is to soak the animal hides, to soften them for cutting. The leather smells strong, but not unpleasant. It reminds you of smoke and earth and heat. Ancient Egypt is not only the land of pharaohs and tombs, it is also the land of sandals. Nearly everyone wears them except children, farmers deep in the field, and the poorest laborers. The rest of society, from scribes to priests to women tending market stalls, wear some form of foot covering. Sandals protect from sharp stones, stinging insects, and the heat of sun-baked ground. But they are also markers of status. There are plain sandals for workers, made of plaited papyrus rope. There are sturdier ones like those Niace makes of cured leather, sometimes dyed reddish-brown with crushed madder root, and for the elite, sandals inlaid with gold leaf or adorned with symbolic shapes, lotus flowers, falcons, cobras. You're not allowed to touch those yet. Your task today is to prepare the palm fiber thread. You sit with a bundle of dried palm fronds and begin stripping them into long, thin fibers. Then, with 2 fingers, you twist them into chord motion, so repetitive and slow. It feels like a prayer. Around you, the city wakes. Neighbors argue good-naturedly. A boy chases a chicken. Somewhere, a priestess chants over incense. But here, in the sandal alcove, time is measured in stitches per hour, not sun shadows. He does not greet you. Instead, he inspects yesterday's stack. 3 sandals completed, 2 awaiting soles. He grunts approval, then sits cross-legged and begins to cut. You watch, fascinated. He marks the leather knot with chalk or pencil, but with a sharpened reed dipped in black soot. His cuts are clean, slow, intentional. He moves without wasting a motion. 1 part of the sole, then the heel strap, then the toe ring. The design is simple but clever, adjustable, firm, and easy to replicate. It is likely similar to sandals worn in Memphis, or Heliopolis, or even far-off Elephantine. Styles vary slightly, but the basic form of Egyptian sandals has changed little in centuries. That, too, is part of their beauty. You are finally allowed to hand him tools, your most honored task. The leather awl is passed down carefully. The bronze knife is wiped before each use. A poorly cleaned tool can ruin a whole day's work, and Niace is not one to waste time. He speaks little, but once, some weeks ago, he told you about sandals found in the tomb of Tutankhamun nearly 100 years earlier. Gold, embroidered, ceremonial. Some were never meant to be worn. They were meant to be walked in the afterlife. Imagine that. Sandals for eternity. But most Egyptians, like you and Niace, live in the now. You make sandals that will walk dusty roads, splash through irrigation, ditches, creak up the temple stairs. You make them to last 6 months, maybe a year, if worn by someone careful. Still, there's an odd dignity in the work. Niace often says, if a priest's words touch the gods, then our souls touch the earth. Both are needed. By midday, the leather is drying fast in the heat. You roll out the thread you twisted this morning. Niace begins stitching the strap to the sole with a curved bone needle. He works slowly, but firmly. You lean in, counting each motion. 1 stitch, 2, then a pause to test the tension. You are not allowed to stitch yet. That is the work of a second-level apprentice, perhaps next season. For now, you watch. During a short break, Niace finally speaks not about the sandals, but about feet. He tells you that feet were often considered symbolic in Egyptian magic. They appear in spells meant to guide the dead through the afterlife, and in curses designed to stop enemies from moving forward. Even in love spells, sandal straps appear, tying 2 hearts together as surely as leather binds toe to heel. You wonder, can something so ordinary, so dull, even hold power? As the afternoon stretches on, you begin cleaning scraps. You save the ones that can be used again and place the rest in the basket that will be taken to the tannery, where children soften the remnants into lining or grind them for glue. You also notice something curious. A customer has returned, not to complain, but to have his old sandals reshaped. His toes have begun to curl inward from years of farming, and the old sole no longer sits flat. Niasse takes measurements using a stick, and he says nothing, but he nods, and with that he begins again, cutting, marking, preparing a new shape. For one man's odd-shaped feet, he adjusts the standard design, a small, silent innovation that no one else will ever see. You sit beside him, threading palm fiber. You wonder how many others do this across Egypt today. How many sandals are being made? How many apprentices are twisting thread, dreaming of the day they'll be trusted with a needle? It is a boring thought, but somehow also a comforting one. As the sun dips low and Niasse packs away his tools, he turns to you, pauses, and finally says, "Tomorrow you stitch." Your heart skips. You nod. You do not smile, but inside, your whole world has shifted. You walk home barefoot. Your only pair of sandals are drying from a cleaning. Your feet press into the warm sand, and for the first time you notice the texture, the small discomforts, the stones that bite at your arch. Tomorrow you will stitch something to protect against all that. Tomorrow you will join the long line of hands who shape quiet comfort from animal skin and palm rope. But as you lie on your woven mat that evening, one thought lingers. How did the craft begin in the first place? Who made the very first pair of sandals in Egypt? And what problem were they solving that day? The next morning, you rise before the first rooster crows. You do not need to be called. You are already awake, sitting on the edge of your mat with your legs crossed, looking at your hands. Today you will stitch dot. And though your fingers are no different than they were yesterday, still smudged with oil and sore from palm fiber, you feel older somehow. It is the feeling of permission, of recognition, of belonging. But before your day begins in full, let's take a step back, not just from Thebes, but from this moment in time. Let's ask the question you left hanging in the dark last night. Where did sandals actually begin? While Egypt has given the world some of the oldest preserved examples of footwear, the invention of the sandal itself almost certainly predates pyramids, papyrus, or even pharaohs. Footwear existed long before cities, before metal, before formal writing. In fact, some of the earliest known sandals ever discovered, woven from sagebrush barkware, found in Oregon, USA, dating back nearly 10,000 years. But in Egypt, sandals became more than necessity. They became art. They became status. And like many things in Egyptian life, their evolution was shaped by environment. The Nile Valley was rich in reeds, palm, and leather-bearing animals, but it was also incredibly hot. Enclosed shoes were not practical. Sandals allowed airflow and flexibility, ideal for dry terrain and warm temperatures. Add in the abundance of craftsmanship, traditions, basket weaving, rope making, tanningen, you have the perfect ingredients for the rise of an everyday necessity. The earliest Egyptian sandals, dating from around 3000 BCE, were often made from woven halfa grass, stitched into flat soles with simple straps. These were used by farmers and workers. They were light, biodegradable, and easily replaced. But as Egyptian society grew more stratified, so too did the complexity of the sandal. By the time of the Old Kingdom c. 268-62181 BCE, sandals had become part of ritual and rank. High officials, wore sandals dyed with rare ochre or hematite, giving them deep red tones. Some bore symbols of power falcons, ankhs, or eyes painted or stitched into the straps. Pharaohs, meanwhile, wore ceremonial sandals with raised soles, indicating they walked above the people, even spiritually. Some were gilded, others adorned with precious stones, not for walking, but for being seen. The craft evolved accordingly. Workshops began to specialize, not only by material, but by clientele. A sandal maker who served the army made heavy-duty pairs, stitched tightly, with thick soles and reinforced toe rings. A temple sandal maker, by contrast, would work in symbolic designs: white straps for purity, lotus shapes for rebirth. Some craftsmen earned high status. Their names were recorded, their tools buried with honor. But most were like Niasse, ordinary, skilled, silent, and the apprentices, always present, always learning. Back in Thebes, you are finally allowed to hold the bone needle. It is not large, perhaps, 2 hand widths long, slightly curved, with a dull edge. The hole is small, barely large enough for your palm fiber thread. Your hands shake slightly as Niasse watches. He says nothing, but his stare is heavy. You insert the needle into the prepared holes already punched by Niasse, yesterday, guiding it through with your thumb and pinching the back end until the thread pulls clean. Then again, then again. Your stitches are uneven, not terrible, but not good either. Niasse stops you. He takes the sandal gently, holds it up to the light, and gestures. Look, he says, the thread is too loose. It will pull free. You nod. You start again. It takes an hour to finish just 1/2 of one sandal. Niasse does not help. But when you finish, and the thread is taut and smooth, he nods. Now the other side. Hours pass. The sun rises high. You don't speak. You stitch by. Midday, you have completed your first full sandal. Not alone, not perfectly, but it is yours. You feel a strange mixture of pride and exhaustion. Niasse offers you a sip of date bira, rare gesture. It is warm and slightly sour, but you drink it gratefully. He then begins to tell you a story, rare for him, as he sharpens his awl on a flat stone. He speaks of Amenhotep III, the great builder of temples, whose court included hundreds of craftsmen, many of whom were responsible for the pharaoh's extensive wardrobe. They say, Niasse murmurs, his sandals were stitched from lion hide, dyed the color of a storm, with gold toes and silver heels. You blink, he continues, but you know what they buried him in. You shake your head. Plain leather sandals, soft, worn, ordinary. You both fall into silence. There is meaning there, though he does not explain it. Your eyes drift across the tools, again the awl, the knife, the stone weight, the reed marker. You think of the people who shaped them, the hands before yours. How many centuries of came before? How many others sat on the same reed mat, sweating, threading, learning? Sandals are not glamorous, but they are deeply, profoundly human. They are the solution to a problem that never changes. The earth is hard, our feet are soft, and even as pyramids crumbled and kingdoms changed, sandals endured, always being made, always being worn, always being repaired. Their history was not written in stone, but in scuff marks and footmolds and worn-down soles. As the sky turns to amber and you pack up the tools, you look at the sandal you made and wonder who will wear it. a merchant walking to market, a priest carrying offerings, a widow visiting her son's tomb. You may never know, but you do know this: it will touch the earth. It will carry someone forward. And you helped shape it, and still, one question walks quietly beside you into the evening. What happens when the sandal breaks? Who repairs what's worn, and how long can a simple thing be made to last before it is forgotten completely? You return to the shop at sunrise the next morning, sandals now strapped tight on your feet, your own pair, mended by your own hand. The stitching is still visible along the side, slightly uneven, but it holds. That is enough. Niasse is already there, sharpening his bronze. He doesn't say anything when you arrive, but he gestures toward the work mat. You sit down and begin to prepare the materials without instruction. It feels different today. You're no longer a passive observer, or just a helper. You're part of the rhythm now, the silent hum of a trade that existed long before you and will outlast you by generations. But today, you're not starting with a new sandal. You're fixing an old one. A woman comes by just after the sun crests the rooftops. Her face is lined and sun-browned. She carries a pair of sandals wrapped in linen well-worn, the toe strap of one nearly torn through, the sole on the other so thin it bends in the middle. These aren't just sandals, they are miles, worn into the shape of her feet, the imprint of her life. She sets them down gently. They were my husband's, she says. He passed in the last flood. I want to wear them in his garden. Niasse doesn't nod or speak. He simply unrolls the linen, inspects the sandals carefully, and sets them aside. You will be the one to repair them. Your hands move more slowly, now not from inexperience, but respect. The leather is soft but delicate. The palm fiber thread has frayed. The sole needs a patch. Niasse helps you trace the new piece cut from old scrap and teaches you how to blend it into the existing stitching. The goal isn't to hide the repair, but to respect the wear, to let the repair become part of the story. This was common in Egypt. Footwear wasn't thrown away easily. Repairs were part of the cycle. Old sandals were passed down, remade, reshaped. Worn soles were layered with fresh palm rope. Torn straps were stitched or replaced entirely. Children often wore sandals made from the remnants of older pear's leather, softened by the years. In fact, archaeologists have found repair marks on many ancient Egyptian sandals, especially those from Deir el-Medina, the workers' village near the Valley of the Kings. The people who built tombs for eternity walked in sandals, stitched from scrap sand, mended them over and over. Even the afterlife required sturdy soles. Some sandals were buried with their owners not as symbols of wealth, but as tools. The ancient belief was simple. The journey to the next world required walking. One must traverse desert, cross rivers, pass through fields, and reach the field of reeds. You couldn't do that barefoot. Some tomb paintings even show gods offering sandals to the deceased, golden, radiant, but still recognizably shaped like the ones Niasse makes. Functional, familiar, you wonder. As you finish repairing the woman's sandals, what kind of terrain her husband might be walking now. You imagine the field of reeds, endless gardens, soft light, and sandals that never wear thin. And yet, here you are, stitching the earthly pair, giving them one more life, one more garden path, one more round beneath the sky. By midday, the repair is done. Niasse inspects your work. It isn't perfect, but it's careful, thoughtful. He nods. The woman returns and takes them with a whispered thanks. You don't ask for payment. Neither does Niasse. Some things aren't priced. Later that day, a merchant arrives in need of a full new pair. He wants something sturdy for travel. He complains about the price. Niasse doesn't argue. He names the cost once. The man pays. You're reminded that sandals are not only practical or symbolic, they are also economic. There were official records in ancient Egypt that counted sandals among state-issued goods. Soldiers, scribes, and temple workers received them as part of their compensation. In one preserved ostracana piece of limestone used for note-taking, there's a tally of sandals distributed by size, type, and destination. Even then, someone was managing inventory, perhaps muttering over numbers as they rubbed their forehead. You picture a harried bureaucrat in Memphis, counting sandals like grain, wondering if anyone ever appreciated how much effort went into making just one pair. They likely didn't, because sandals are easy to forget until you're without them. That's the quiet truth of these objects. They are background players in every great historical scene. Sandals on the feet of the scribe, recording royal decrees. On the feet of the courier, rushing through temple courts. On the builders who carved stone from the desert and raised it skyward. None of those sandals survived, but their shape did. Their imprint passed forward through hands like yours. As you close the shop that evening, sweeping leather dust into a small pile, Niasse finally speaks. When I die, he says, don't bury me in sandals. You blink, unsure if it's a joke. He looks at you. Let me feel the earth again. You nod, unsure what to say. And as you walk home, you feel the dust clinging to your own sandals, the worn strap pressing against your ankle. The sensation is both grounding and oddly comforting. Your walk is slower now, not from fatigue, but awareness. Tomorrow you will make another pair, or repair one, or twist thread. Nothing remarkable, nothing new. And yet, when does a sandal stop being just a sandal and become a record of every step someone took, every market visited, every temple climbed, every garden tended in the hush before sunset? Story 3. Pillows of Papyrus. Ancient Egyptians sleep and dreams. The day is nearly done in ancient Egypt. The sun sinks slowly behind the palms, casting long, flickering shadows across the Nile. You've had your evening meal bread dipped in lentil stew, perhaps a few dates, if the season is kind. And now the world is growing still. A warm breeze passes through the open slits in your mud brick wall. Your mat is unrolled. Your body aches from work. And it's time finally to lie down, but not on a pillow. Instead, your head will rest upon a semicircular stone, wood, or ceramic object, gently curved to cradle your neck. It is called a headrest. And if you're like most Egyptians, rich or poor, it's all you've ever known. To a modern sleeper, it might sound dreadful, cold, stiff, unforgiving. But to you, it is comfort, familiar, ordinary, and more than anything else, sits what guards the threshold between this world and the next. Because in ancient Egypt, sleep was never just sleep, it was a voyage. The Egyptian headrest, or wurs, as it was sometimes called, is one of the more quietly peculiar artifacts of daily life in the ancient world. Composed of a curved platform supported by a central pillar, often placed upon a sturdy base. It was designed not to cushion the head, but to elevate and align it, particularly the neck during sleep. Why? For one, ventilation. Egypt, even in its coolest months, remained a place of warm nights and thick air. Lifting the head allowed air to circulate beneath the neck, offering relief. This was especially important for people sleeping directly on woven mats or simple reed flooring. The ground retained heat-tanned insects. A lifted head discouraged both, but the headrest was also believed to serve another function. It protected the soul during sleep. In Egyptian cosmology, to sleep was to dip briefly into death. The body, though unmoving, was not truly empty. The soul, particularly the Ba, often imagined as a bird with a human face, could leave the body and travel. It might soar across the stars, visit gods, wander among the tombs of ancestors, or even return with messages. But to do so safely required care. Headrests were often carved or painted with protective symbols, ujat eyes, scarabs, or gods, with knives to fend off evil spirits. In tombs, they were placed under the head of the mummy with similar intention, to lift the soul, to guard the passage. Some were made of wood acacia, sycamore, or tamarisk. Others, for the wealthy, were shaped from alabaster or even ivory, adorned with inlays of lapis or turquoise. But their shape rarely changed. A single curve, a small lift, a cradle for dreams, and what dreams they believed in. You lie now on your mat, head upon the wooden curve, the stars beginning to blink, awake outside. You think about what you hope to dream. Perhaps you'll dream of your mother, long past, offering advice beside a lotus pond. Perhaps you'll find yourself walking through fields of grain that shimmer in colors no sun has ever shown. Perhaps, if you're lucky, you'll see Thoth scribe of the gods writing your name in a scroll of blessings. In Egypt, dreams were messages. Not every night, of course. Some were meaningless fragments, but others carried weight. Dream interpreters existed in temples and court. Some were priests, others were trained scribes with access to dream books, collections of symbols and their meanings. A crocodile meant an enemy. A flood, flying meant freedom unless you fell, in which case it foretold loss. One such dream book, preserved on a papyrus, now housed in the British Museum, catalogues over 100 dreams. Some are comical, some mundane, others profound. If a man dreams he eats crocodile meat, it means he will triumph over his enemy. If a man sees himself weeping, it means happiness is coming. If a man sees himself lying with his wife in the sunlight, it means he will be divorced. These interpretations weren't random. They were rooted in belief, ritual, and observation. Temples had dream chambers, special spaces where visitors could sleep in the hopes of receiving divine insight. It was known as incubation, and so, in daily life, one went to bed not just to rest, but to open the self to visions, warnings, perhaps even healing. Back in your humble room, the night deepens. The breeze has faded, and the only sounds are the faint calls of frogs by the canal. You shift slightly on your mat. The headrest presses into the curve of your neck. It is not soft, but it is steady. You imagine your Ba fluttering up from your chest, shaking its tiny wings, ready to rise. And before sleep takes you, a question stirs faintly in your mind, carried on the dusty scent of wood and oil. What did the ancient Egyptians do when dreams went wrong, when nightmares came, or the soul wandered too far. Asterisk, the room is dark, save for a tiny glimmer of starlight creeping through the narrow slit in your mud brick wall. You shift again. The curve of your headrest still cradles your neck, though one side has begun to feel too hard, and yet you do not sleep. Why? Because something stirs at the edges of your thoughts. A creeping sensation, neither fully waking nor fully dreaming. You remember now the question that tugged at you before your eyes closed. What happens when a dream goes wrong? In ancient Egypt, this was no idle worry. Sleep was not simply a passive act, it was a liminal space, a threshold, and like all thresholds, it had guardians and intruders. The Egyptians, ever attentive to the many dimensions of the unseen, had a name for troubling dreams, Pasegetu, Shemorafli, dark wanderings. These dreams were not merely unfortunate, they were considered spiritually dangerous, a warning that something in your world, your body, your home, your relationships was misaligned. Sometimes it was the fault of the dreamer, a misstep during the day, an impure thought, a forgotten offering. Other times it was blamed on malevolent spirits, beings that moved under moonlight, slipping into rooms to twist the threads of dreams. Nightmares were, in essence, cosmic interruptions, and they required action. Let us begin with the amulet. If your sleep turned restless, marked by visions of falling fire, or serpentsit, was customary to consult the local healer or priest. These figures would sometimes prescribe a protective charm to be worn on the neck, tied to the bedpost, or even tucked into the folds of your sleeping mat. One common amulet was shaped like the eye of Horus Ujat. Its curved lines were said to restore wholeness, especially to the eyes and mind. Another was the scarab beetle, symbolizing rebirth and renewal. Still others bore images of Base, the squat, lion-faced dwarf god of domestic protection. Base was, in many ways, the patron of dreams. He was no grand sky deity. He lived in homes, behind curtains, on headrests, in the creases of linen robes. And while his appearance was comical, large ears, bulging eyes, tongue poking out, he was no fool. He guarded sleepers, especially children and pregnant women. He snarled at evil spirits. He danced. He shook rattles. He made noise to frighten off the night. Some headrests were carved with Bess's face, staring outward like a guardian on patrol. Others featured hieroglyphic spells, short phrases of protection. One such inscription, found on a tomb, read, "Sleep in peace, child of Ra. May no serpent draw near. May no shadow pass over you. May your soul return with the sunrise." That last line, "May your soul return," hints at the most feared possibility, that the Ba, the soul bird, might not come back. You see, the Egyptians believed the soul left the body at night, flitting between worlds, visiting loved ones, speaking with gods, or reliving past memories. This was both beautiful and terrifying, because if something happened while the Ba was a waif, a spirit blocked its path, or the body was disturbed, the soul might fail to return. And then, come morning, the body might not wake. To prevent this, some households engaged in nightly rituals. Incense was burned, water sprinkled around the bed. Certain foods, onions, garlic, were believed to repel demons. Dream oil was applied to the forehead, a mix of myrrh, juniper, and lotus, meant to induce calm sleep and positive visions in the Book of the Dead, a funerary text meant to guide souls through the afterlife. Several spells are explicitly linked to dreams. They speak of gates, guardians, and narrow paths, so knowing the names of the spirits one might encounter while asleep. But not all dream dangers were spiritual. Some were political. In the court of Pharaoh Merneptah, it was rumored that dreams could be used as tools of conspiracy. If a high priest claimed to have received a troubling dream about the king's death, it could spread unrest. For this reason, royal dream interpreters were carefully monitored. Many scribes were trained in both statecraft and symbolic interpretation to manage the power of suggestion. It was even said that Seti, father of Ramses the Great, built a chamber in Abydos solely for dream incubation, a place where high priests could lie beneath star-covered ceilings and petition the gods for safe guidance through dreams. But what of the ordinary sleeper? The farmer in his straw hut, the weaver's apprentice, the widow alone with her children. For them, protection lay in habit. Don't sleep facing west, that's the direction of the dead. Don't sleep in a tomb, or next to someone who's cursed, or under an unblessed roof. Don't let the oil lamp burn too low, and above all, don't wake too suddenly. You might jar the BA on its way home, in homes where dreams were chronicled, sometimes in ink, sometimes whispered to elders. There were also shared remedies. If the nightmare was about teeth falling out, chew acacia bark in the morning. If the dream involved drowning, pour Nile water over your feet before breakfast. If you saw a black cat with two tails, move house. These remedies weren't guaranteed, but they were reassurances shared across generations, like folk songs, ways of turning chaos into pattern, fear into familiarity. Tonight, you lie on your headrest once more. The dream from last night still lingers, a flash of red, a long hallway, a bird that would not speak. You rub a tiny scarab charm between your fingers. You say the words you were taught as a child. Come back to me, my bird, with feet of flame. Come back with light in your wings. May you land at dawn upon my lips. You close your eyes, and now, just as sleep begins to drift in around your ankles, like river mist, you feel the weight of the next question flutter softly in your chest. What did it mean when a dream was too good, so good, in fact, that you no longer wished to wake? Dawn creeps softly into your room. The slanted light of early sun filters through the cracks, brushing the edge of your reed mat, touching the corner of your foot. But you do not stir, not right away, because in your dream you were standing in a garden, not a garden of this world, not one that belonged to your village, your family, or even your gods. It was quiet. The trees were tall, unfamiliar. The breeze smelled not of Nile mud or smoke, but of figs in bloom, and something sweeter, maybe cinnamon. You were not alone. Someone walked beside you, unclear, voice distant, but you knew them. Somehow, your heart knew. You wanted to stay, but the bird within you knew it was time to return. And so it lifted you, reluctantly, away from the garden, away from everything soft and perfect. And now, here you are, blinking into the sun, a little heartbroken. Not all dreams are warnings. In ancient Egypt, as in many ancient cultures, there was a category of dreams that carried not danger, but divine closeness. Dreams that felt more real than waking life, filled with strange clarity and a joy that lingered. These were not dismissed. In fact, They were considered gifts. Temples across Egypt maintained what might be called dream libraries, papyrus scrolls, mural inscriptions, oral records, all describing dreams that brought healing, prophecy, or joy. Pilgrims seeking these dreams would travel to certain shrines and sleep within their walls, hoping for a divine visitation. They offered food, incense, and prayer. One of the most famous centers of dream healing was at the temple of Serapis, a Greco-Egyptian god of the Ptolemaic period, whose cult promised dreams of deep peace and cosmic order. But even earlier, people journeyed to Abydos, Saqqara, and Memphis to sleep in sacred chambers, hoping to see Osiris, Hathor, or even Ra in their dreams. If a dream was good, vivid, beautiful, rich with meaning, it could be written down, sometimes on Astraca limestone shards, sometimes painted onto household walls, sometimes whispered to a priest. In homes, such dreams were shared in the morning with reverence. I saw a staircase made of gold. I heard my grandmother's voice calling me by name. I drank from a pool and did not thirst again. These weren't just dreams. They were reminders that the world was bigger than the waking day and more layered than flesh and bone. But not everyone welcomed these dreams. Some feared them because, occasionally, a dream was so lovely, so immersive, that it left the dreamer changed. There are records, fragmentary, faded dove, people who became quiet, distant, after certain dreams. They lost interest in their daily tasks. They withdrew from loved ones. They kept returning to sleep again and again, hoping to revisit the same garden, the same voice, the same glimpse of what felt like another life. Egyptians had a phrase for this. When the soul's foot is caught in the field of reeds, it was not quite a curse, but it was a warning. The field of reeds, the idealized afterlife, a place of unending abundance, green crops, clear water, music, love, and eternal sunlight. But one was not meant to dwell there until properly judged and prepared. To visit it in dreams was a gift. To long for it more than life was a problem. Temples offered remedies. A specific incense blend, kifi, made from myrrh, honey, wine, and other herbs, was burned near dreamers who couldn't wake fully. Some healers used chanting or gentle shaking. Others applied oils to the soles of the feet, grounding the soul by scent and touch. There was even a prayer kept by housewives and midwives. O bird of night, come home. Do not perch on the western sycamore. Your field is not ready. Your name is still spoken here. Back in your home, you rise slowly. Your body feels heavier than usual, as though you've walked for hours. But you haven't left your mat. You remember the garden. You remember the quiet laughter. You remember the sky that bent into colors you've never seen. And a part of you wants to go back, but outside, someone is calling. There is a marketplace to help with, a bucket to fill, a roof that needs rethatching before the next rain. These are not grand duties, but they are yours. You step into your sandals soft from where, and walk into the light. And even though you've left the dream behind, something of it lingers. Maybe that's the secret, you think. Not to chase the dream again, but to carry a piece of it forward. To make the waking world a little softer, a little kinder. To greet others with the same joy you felt in that garden. You pause. You look at the dusty street, the chatter of neighbors, the scent of cooking oil and onion, and you smile, because perhaps that was the message all along. Not every dream is meant to be returned to, some are meant to be remembered. Story 4. The Clay Tablet Clerk. Office work in ancient Mesopotamia is morning in the city of Nippur, and the air already smells of dust and damp reed. Your sandals slap softly against the sun-baked road as you make your way through the maze of narrow alleys past crumbling mud walls, open doorways, bleeding goats. Above you, thin linen awnings stretch between rooftops, fluttering faintly in the breeze, like tired flags marking time. You are not a farmer, not a merchant, not a priest. You are a clerk, a scribe of barley and baskets, of tablets and tallies, and you are late. The clay tablet office is tucked behind the temple of Enlil, where holy men chant and acolytes sweep grain from the thresholds. You nod respectfully as you pass, though you know your business lies elsewhere, not in the realm of guides, but in columns of numbers and lines of grain deliveries. And as the gatekeeper waves you in, you exhale. Another day in the office. Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, was also the land of lists, the birthplace of bureaucracy. Long before the scroll, before the codex, even before the inked quill, there was clay, malleable, abundant, and permanent when fired. And so the people of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria wrote everything in clay, not just myths and royal decrees, but taxes, inventories, receipts, personnel logs, ingredient lists, school exercises, rental agreements, and the ones who kept this intricate world spinning were not kings or warriors, but scribes, people like you. Your tools are simple: a small basket of clay tablets, still soft and ready for impressions, a set of reeds, some blunt for large markings, others finely shaped for more delicate work, and a damp cloth for wiping your hands and smoothing edges. The script is cuneiform wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay. It's not a flowing language, it's slow, geometric, like talking with stones. You've trained for years to master it. You still remember your teacher's chant. Write the line straight, keep the symbols clear. 1 wedge for barley, 2 for beer. The room you work in is cool, its walls thick with plaster and shaded by woven matting. There is no desk. You sit on a low stool, the clay tablet resting on a raised board in front of you. Your knees ache. Your fingers are stained with red dust and the occasional nick from a sharp reed. And your task today, barley records. You pick up a half tablet from yesterday about the size of a hand, curved like a banana red over the impressions. Month of sheep shearing, year 12 of the king barley. 72 baskets delivered from the farm of Pazarashur to the granary of the temple. 3 baskets short. You frown. The totals don't match the receipts. You check a second tablet, a small one. A receipt chit given to a delivery man to compare. 75 baskets. Confirm. You sigh. Either Pazarashur is skimming off the top, or someone in the granary is pocketing grain. You mark the discrepancy in a third tablet carefully, precisely, and set it aside. It will go to your overseer. This is the daily work of the ancient office, quiet, repetitive, but not unimportant. Barley wasn't just food, it was currency, it was wages, it was rations for workers, it was sacrifice for the gods. A single miscount could ripple outward, causing shortages, disputes, even punishment. That's why clerks like you mattered. You were a wall against chaos, finger plugging the crack in the damn dot, and yet no one thanks you for it. Outside, the sun climbs higher. A boy runs past with a bundle of new clay. He's late for scribe school letaba, the tablet houseware children learn by copying lists and hymns. You remember those days well. Your back still hurts from all the kneeling. Your supervisor enters, Ilambani, thin and stern, a man with a permanent squint. He drops 3 fresh delivery records beside you with a grunt. No greeting, just the work. You begin again. Month of lions, year 12. Wedge, wedge, line, dot. You lose track of time. Later, a runner brings a message. The river is swelling. A caravan. Delayed. No barley from the northern farms this week. You press a short update into a tablet. You know what that means: adjustments to tomorrow's ration lists in the margins of one tablet. You add a little note, technically not allowed. Puzzer oshers. Men speak too loudly. Send them away next time. It's not official, but it's honest. The tablet will dry overnight. If important, it will be fired in a kill. If minor, it will be stored in the archive room, along with thousands of others, some marked with reed string tags, some sealed with cylinder stamps, some unread for decades. And you wonder, as you stretch your hands and rub your eyes, will anyone ever read this again? It's a strange thought, because despite the dust and tedium, this work is durable. A cuneiform tablet, once fired, can survive centuries, millennia even. You're just doing math. But one day, it might be someone's clue, someone's window into a world of baskets and barley and bored scribes named Ilambani. And yet, as the light fades, another thought lingers with you. What was it like to be the scribe of a king when your tablet didn't just track barley, but shaped history? Asterisk, the room you're in now is larger, still shaded, still filled with the dry, earthen smell of clay. But this room has polished floors, cushioned benches, fine scrollwork on the doors. A pair of guards stands by the entrance knot for decoration. Their eyes are sharp, scanning even the couriers who come in daily. You are still a clerk, but today you're no longer in the quiet counting chamber near the granary. You've been summoned to the palace office of records in Babylon, city of gates, hanging gardens, and high expectations. You smooth your tunic, you clean your stylus, you swallow a small knot of nerves, because this is not just barley work. This is royal law-keeping. The scribes who worked in the courts of kings, especially in cities like Babylon, or Nineveh, were no ordinary tallymen. They were recorders of treaties, editors of decrees, interpreters of omens, and sometimes advisors to power. While humble scribes counted fish or grain, royal scribes inscribed the foundations of civilization: taxes, building projects, boundary laws, and court rulings, and above all, the codes. Today, your task is to copy a portion of the royal legal code one created generations ago, under the authority of Hammurabi. You've heard of him, of course. Everyone has. Hammurabi, 6th king of Babylon, said to be chosen by Shamash, the god of justice. He had many laws carved into a giant black stele, topped with his image, receiving the law from the sun god himself. But the laws weren't just symbolic. They were copied again and again by clerks like you onto clay tablets that were distributed across the kingdom, placed in temples, reviewed by judges, read to villagers, memorized by students. You hold one such partial copy. Now it's worn, scratched by careless fingers, edges crumbling from damp. Your job, to make a clean copy on fresh clay, clear, precise, ready for preservation. You read the faded lines. If a builder builds a house for a man and does not make its construction firm, and the house which he has built collapses and causes the death of the owner, that builder shall be put to death. You pause, you glance at the guard. He nods toward the fresh clay slab waiting beside you. You begin copying. Each stroke is deliberate, not just because of the clay's resistance, but because the words matter. These laws weren't abstract ideals. They were binding rules backed by state authority. If you miswrote a wedge, you confused the sign for death with the one for fine. Life could hang in the balance, and some signs look nearly identical. You take your time. As you press each wedge into the clay, you begin to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just law. It was social order, a system trying to regulate a chaotic world where people might steal, accuse, lie, or forget. Another law. If a man rents an ox and injures it through negligence, he shall compensate the owner with an ox of equal value. You smile faintly. Even livestock injuries had legal precedent. You wonder, how often did these laws actually get enforced? Did judges memorize all 282 clauses? Did farmers cite them in arguments? Some historians believe the Code of Hammurabi was less about daily use and more about projecting authority, a display of the king's divine wisdom and fairness. But even so, people internalized its ideas. It created expectation. It shaped how scribes, like you, recorded disputes. Midday passes. You've completed half the tablet. Your fingers ache, but your mind is alert. You recall that royal scribes were also interpreters of omens. A priest might report a strange constellation, a birth defect in a goat, or an unusual cloud. The king would ask for written guidance. What does it mean? If the moon is dark on the night of the new year, and Venus does not rise before dawn, then the harvest shall fail. You've seen tablets like this, lists of signs, each matched with consequences. Some called it superstition, but to the king it was intelligence, a way to read the gods' intentions before making war or choosing a bride. In fact, some scribes were sent to battle not to fight, but to record omens and keep tally of supplies. Even the king's dreams were written down. One royal archive in Nineveh belonging to Ashurbanipal held tens of thousands of tablets, legal texts, royal letters, medicinal recipes, prayers, and dream interpretations. Many were copied over generations, word for word. A single mistake could mislead the next king or make the gods angry. You wonder how many of those scribes felt the pressure. You wonder if they ever wished to go back to the barley office. You finish the last line of your copy. If a judge renders a judgment, and later it is found to be incorrect, he shall pay 12-fold the fine he imposed, and shall be removed from his seat. You blink. You set your stylus down. You gently smooth the tablet's surface, brushing off crumbs of dry clay. You press your personal scribe mark into the bottom 3 small wedges, shaped like a river-redanned hand. The piece to the overseer. He glances at it, nods, and without a word, waves in the next clerk. As you leave the palace office, stepping back into the dust and din of Babylon, a new thought crosses your mind. Was there ever a moment when the scribe's words changed a king's? Mindor saved a city from war. The street is quieter now, the sun just beginning to set behind Babylon's western towers. The scent of the day-baked bricks, camel sweat, dried dates lingers in the air, but it's beginning to cool. You walk slowly, your tablet work complete for the day. But your mind isn't quiet. You're still thinking about that last question. Could a scribe ever change a king's mind? In a world ruled by monarchs, who were often thought to be divine or at least favored by the gods, it might seem impossible. Kings commanded armies, ordered executions, raised ziggurats from nothing, and you moved clay around with a reed stick. But then, not all scribes were equal. Let's go back to the court of Sargon, of Akkad, centuries before Hammurabi. His empire, the first in recorded history, stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. His armies were mighty, his rule absolute. But behind his rise stood a man named Ibn Siroma, scribe, known only from fragmentary letters and archive entries. His role: interpreter, messenger, advisor, and, when needed, a gentle persuader. One surviving letter, now in a museum in Istanbul, reveals Ibn Sarum cautioning Sargon, "My lord, the men of Mari are proud and speak words they do not carry out. To strike now may bring noise, not victory." The phrasing is careful. He does not defy the king. He advises with respect, and scholars believe Sargon paused his campaign, perhaps even avoided a costly rebellion because of words like these. Scribes were also diplomats. They wrote the Amarna letters, a cache of over 300 clay tablets discovered in Egypt, but written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language of the time. These were not poems or myths. They were real communications between rulers, requests for gold, apologies for missed tribute, arranged marriages, subtle insults dressed as formal pleasantries. One letter from a Babylonian king to the pharaoh reads, "You sent me to minas of gold, which, when looked upon, was not even half gold. Why such behavior between kings?" Imagine being the scribe who had to write that tone balanced, message clear, honor intact. These weren't just stylists. They were cultural translators. One poorly chosen phrase could offend a powerful ruler. One too bold suggestion could spark a war. So scribes learned to be masters of subtlety. They used formal openings like "To my brother, who rules justly and shines like Shamash," even if the next sentence was a veiled threat. Their training wasn't only linguistic, it was psychological. In times of war, scribes recorded battle orders. They counted the dead. They wrote casualty lists and ration manifests. But sometimes they were also recorders of pleas. A story survives from the court of Nebuchadnezzar II, the famed king who built Babylon's hanging gardens, or so legend says. General returned from a long siege, bringing with him a prisoner, a rebellious governor who had tried to take a fortress town. The law was clear. Rebellion meant death. But before sentence could be passed, a royal scribe named in the record presented a tablet of defense. It recounted the governor's earlier service, his loyalty during a border crisis, his rescue of wounded soldiers. It noted with care that this was his first offense, and that others had whispered treason in his ears. The king spared him. The scribe's logic, his memory, and most of all, his tone, measured, deliberate, and backed by records, had turned fate. You stop now at the edge of the canal, watching the boats pull in. The city hums around you. Two boys chase each other with wooden sticks. A vendor sings about onions and sour beer. The stars begin to appear, and you think what made a scribe powerful wasn't just the stylus or the tablet, it was trust. The king trusted the scribe to remember what others forgot, to record the truth quietly, without flair, but with care, to know when to speak and when to remain silent. A well-timed tablet could steer policy. A well-worded law could soften punishment. A well-kept archive could save an entire city from ruin when disputes arose over ancient boundaries. In that way, scribes did shape history, not with swords or speeches, but with clay. You walk home slowly, stylus still in your pocket, clay dust still under your fingernails. You wonder, as the stars brighten above, will someone, thousands of years from now, read your tablet and wonder who you were and what stories you chose to write down?